Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk Climate, a webcast series from ecoAmerica, featuring dynamic discussions with local and national leaders offering a diverse perspective. Let's Talk Climate brings forth the latest thinking and best practices for building public support and political resolve for equitable climate solutions in the U.S. I'm Gibbs Raylan, Director of the American Climate Leadership Awards Program at ecoAmerica. The awards offer $175,000 in financial rewards and national recognition to exemplary climate leaders and organizations. Today is the first part in our three-part series, You Can Do This, Replicable Models for Local Climate Action. We are featuring American Climate Leadership Award finalist, Alternatives for Community and Environment, or ACE. During later sessions, we will talk to fellow 2022 finalists, Green Roots and Schools for Climate Action. Sofia Owen, Environmental Justice Legal Services Director and Staff Attorney, is representing ACE. Welcome, Sofia.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here today. You are doing important work for the most vulnerable and underserved, whether it's individuals who are most affected by our changing climate or the incarcerated. Thank you for your service to others. Well, let's dig right in so the viewers can learn more about your work and about you. My first question is about you and your background. Why climate and what made you choose this sector?
It's a great question. And I guess my origin story or intro to the work started when I was in middle school. My dad ran for selectman in our small town in Northeast Massachusetts. And his reason for running for selectman was because of a proposal to bring water and sewer systems out to Plum Island, which is a barrier island. And the issue that he had wasn't that people shouldn't have sewer and water, but the proposal that had been brought forward hadn't been tested in the Northeast. It hadn't been tested any further north than the Carolinas. And he was really concerned about the environmental impacts that would have. It brought up potential eminent domain issues in terms of property and control over land to have access to the infrastructure and water. And so that was my first sort of local politics and environmental issues intertwined. My first experience door knocking and sort of starting to think about organizing and what that looks like. And from then I got really invested in domestic politics and saw the power of that organizing in support of candidates who I believed in, and worked for someone who won his election by just 1,500 votes when I was in college. And I know I knocked on that many doors that summer. And so felt like I really had made a difference. But I had always sort of been aware of the interconnections between environmental issues, race, and poverty. And it was in law school when I, during one of my co-ops, went out to the Navajo reservation and was doing legal aid work out there, which wasn't explicitly environmental, but every case that I had, every client that I had some sort of there was a piece of their story or a piece of their legal issue that touched on environmental issues. And as I said, implicated, race, poverty, and also just the special relationship, for a kind way to put it, between the US government and indigenous governments. And so I came back from there really wanting to dig in on that side of the work and finding work that blended those three things. And love being at ACE because I get to use the law as a tool, but it is not the be all and the end all of what I do. We really focus on leveraging the law as a tool, but at the end of the day, it's about building power for Black, Brown, Indigenous, and other folks of color and the people who've been most excluded from decision making.
Wow, that's quite impressive and absolutely sounds like some first powerful experiences to get you where you are today. So if we want to learn more about ACE's mission, could you share a little bit more about the organization's work and really what's most special to you about this work? And I know a lot of our listeners are really interested in results. And so if you could talk a little bit about some of those over the last, say, a year and a half.
Sure. I'm going to actually go back a little bit further than the last year or year and a half, but I'm going to talk about some more recent work later. But so ACE is a Black-led and predominantly Black staffed membership-based organization in Roxbury, which is a traditionally Black neighborhood in Boston. We were founded in the early 90s by two white lawyers who were really focused on the intersection of environment and public health and wanted to use the law as a tool to help communities to address the legal issues where they existed in terms of environmental threats. So things like trash transfer stations, coal ash dumps, all of that kind of thing. But we've also always focused on transportation justice. So working to ensure that folks in Roxbury and in other communities of color throughout the state have access to accessible, affordable, reliable public transit. So our mission is to build the power of communities of color and low-income communities in Massachusetts to eradicate environmental racism and classism, to create healthy and sustainable communities, and to achieve environmental justice. And all of our work, unfortunately, stems from systemic inequality and racism. And as I said before, we're working not only to stop pollution and to reduce public health disparities, but to build power for the folks who have been kept out of the rooms where decisions are made. And several of our programs, the Tea Writers Union, which is an organizing arm of ACE that is led and directed by writers of the tea, and then the Roxbury Environmental Empowerment Project, our youth program, both are really focused on the people most impacted by issues, speaking for themselves and advocating for change. And so the thing that makes ACE unique and the thing that I love most is that we approach the work both from a community organizing perspective and with a legal and policy perspective in mind. And we are, to my knowledge, I think the only community-based organization in Massachusetts and perhaps in the Northeast that actually has a staff attorney in-house to help guide that work. And so I want to tell a story about that approach. So we've been working on air quality since 1996. And at that time, REAP, our youth program, was going into classrooms at a local middle school, the Phyllis Wheatley, and students there were learning about environmental justice and wanted to create green space in Nubian Square, which is the area where our office is located. And during that year, unfortunately, one of the students died of a severe asthma attack. That student had been diagnosed with asthma as an infant and lived near the MBTA's Bartlett bus yard, which was located on Washington Street, which is right around the corner from our office. The MBTA, for those who aren't local, is our public transit system in the Boston area. And so the death of this student opened other students' eyes to issues around air pollution in Roxbury, and it motivated REAP to start working to stop dirty diesel emissions and to prevent asthma. So over the following years, students involved with REAP from several local middle schools organized an anti-idling march that went from Eggleston Square, which is the heart of where a lot of the students lived, along Washington Street, which is where the bus yard was, to Nubian Station, which is one of the biggest bus hubs for the MBTA. And along the way, the students ticketed city, state, and MBTA diesel vehicles that were breaking the state's idling law, including the buses at Bartlett Yard. After that, we created a Clean Buses for Boston coalition that focused on the MBTA, and through that convinced the T to order 350 compressed natural gas buses in 2001 and another 100 cleaner fuel buses in 2002. And so now the entire MBTA bus fleet runs on compressed natural gas or with diesel engines that filter out 90% of emissions. And they do have a handful of buses that are electric. A big result from the anti-idling march came in 2002 when the EPA issued a violation notice to the T for idling at 4 bus yards, including Bartlett Yard. And in 2005, Bartlett Yard closed for good. So yeah, which was a huge victory. So after that, we pivoted to trying to ensure that something like this would never happen again. So our young people worked with ACE attorneys to draft the first version of the diesel emissions reduction ordinance, and went to meetings with city officials, the Boston Public Health Commission, and Representative Marty Walsh, who later went on to become mayor of the city. We held hearings related to DERO at City Hall in 2011 and 2012, and had creative actions to push for the ordinance in 2013. And we launched an air quality team in 2014 to help people connect the dots between asthma and the diesel work. So we surveyed respondents throughout the neighborhood, just asking them questions about where they had difficulty breathing, when they noticed that this was a problem, if there were particular places that were an issue. And of the respondents, more than half reported that Nubian Station, again, one of the biggest bus hubs in Boston and right around the corner from my office, is a place where folks had difficulty breathing. And 70% of folks said that the primary sources of the pollution were from construction sites and equipment. And everyone was aware of the fact that development was a huge issue in the neighborhood. So over time, we partnered with Tufts University to do some air quality monitoring, and went through several rounds of updates to draft the ordinance. But when it was finally passed, it was based on science and what we heard from the community. And every step of the way, our staff attorney partnered with the Reapers, so that it was really a tag team effort, and it was never just our attorney going it alone to those meetings.
Right. Well, that's quite impressive. It shows you the power again of the community organizing, the youth aspect, and really making sure you're bringing along all the stakeholders. And I didn't realize what a rich history you have. Thanks for sharing that story, and to give the viewers a concept of how much you've accomplished over really quite a long time. So right now, what is ACE most focused on? What's your big project that's in the works today?
Great question. I think everything that we are working on sort of falls under the umbrella of improving air quality. As the previous story shows, despite the passage of DERO and the fact that in a lot of ways emissions are being reduced from stationary sources like power plants, Worcester, Springfield, and Boston are still among the top 20 worst cities in the country for people with asthma. And we know that Black folks waiting for the bus in Boston wait at least 64 more hours for the bus than their white counterparts. And for Latinx riders, it's at least 10 more hours. So that's 64 more hours waiting, breathing air filled with exhaust from all of these sources, which was unacceptable before COVID. But given what we now know about the links between respiratory disease and COVID, we feel even more empowered to act. So we're continuing to organize residents and push for policy change, both on the local and state level. So this spring, in partnership with Olin College, we launched a local air quality monitoring network in the neighborhood, and are planning to use the data from the monitors to educate our members and residents and to back up our policy work, which includes advocating for state laws to reduce disparities in air quality. But the project that I am most excited about right now, and which will sound familiar to those who paid attention to the awards earlier this year is our work on building emissions. So for over 2 years, we worked with the city of Boston and at the NRDC in a process facilitated by our co-conspirators at One Square Worlds to craft an updated building emissions reduction and disclosure ordinance. And the update is that, so previously building owners just had to report their energy use to the city. This update requires them actually to reduce their emissions. Right. And throughout the process, about 200 community members from 4 organizations, including ACE, helped to ground truth this process. And so we made sure that every step of the way, perspectives from our members and local residents was incorporated into the policy. And for folks who know what a just transition is, the idea that we move from an extractive economy that relies on fossil fuels toward collaborative, restorative, regenerative practices, we see this as one step on that train, listening to impacted communities and creating policies that don't rely on those extractive fossil fuels and that benefit the folks on the front lines of the climate crisis. So I'm just really briefly going to share a little more about Birdo. So the community was clear. They care about reducing building emissions, but wanted to see more than just reductions in emissions in this policy. As I mentioned before, Roxbury has an asthma rate that is the second highest in the city. It's 15.7%. Black Bostonians are more likely to die of lung cancer than any other racial or ethnic group. And in general, Black, brown, and low-income residents are more likely to depend on public transit and to live in buildings that are not energy efficient or weatherized. So for context, it's 4% of buildings in Boston. So the largest owners of property, think hospitals, universities, large management companies, that are responsible for almost 70% of the city's emissions. So we knew we had to tackle that problem. Yeah, it's huge.
Huge.
And residents, as I said, wanted to see more than just emissions reductions. They wanted to improve both indoor and outdoor air quality. They wanted reductions in their energy bills. They didn't want the policy to fuel gentrification and displacement. And they wanted to be living in homes that were more energy efficient. And then finally, if the work to do these updates is going to create jobs, they wanted those jobs to go to folks locally. So we pushed for all of those things to be included. And two things that I'm most proud of about what we did. We pushed the city not to include the purchase of carbon offsets as a method for compliance. So folks probably know offsets give companies the option to pay, essentially to be able to continue to pollute. And they allow folks to feel like they're addressing climate change without actually reducing their emissions locally. So if building owners, in the case of Birdo, don't meet the standard, which they can do in a variety of ways, they can make a payment into a fund, and the funds used will be for projects that benefit environmental justice populations, support housing justice, and reduce displacement, and have strong worker protections. And from the work that we did on DERO, we learned that oversight of implementation and enforcement is super important. So we pushed for a review board for this ordinance to have a 2/3 majority nominated by community-based organizations like ACE that have an expertise in environmental justice, housing, and climate justice. Because we wanted to make sure we could hold building owners accountable for the impacts of non-compliance.
Right.
Yeah. So right now, the city is drafting the regulations that give more detail on what this will look like. And so, again, one of the lessons we learned from DERO was you have to keep watchdogging that process. So we are meeting bi-weekly with the city to hash out what we want to see, and we are helping them to create and facilitate community meetings this summer that will focus just on the folks most impacted by these issues, the residents of the buildings and folks who live in the neighborhoods where these buildings are, to get their input and make sure that that what is going into the regulations is meeting their needs. So there's a lot going on. Some of it can be pretty wonky, but it's the thing that I love about it is that it's bringing these things that, you know, it takes a lot of time to understand how a building performance standard works, and you can break that down for people and give that information to them, as long as you are doing it in ways that matter to them. So like if you're talking, when you talk about it from the frame of helping to reduce asthma, helping to reduce your energy bills, and that we are actively pushing the city not to further gentrification and displacement, there's more trust that you know, that different future is possible.
Absolutely. No, and you know, as you were talking about all this really important stakeholder engagement, you think about how thoughtful you have to be when you go into this process, right? And also how it can seem almost overwhelming to tackle climate and for, you know, and how do we get it right? And so I want our listeners to feel like they're empowered on this issue. So if you were to give a recommendation of one action that our viewers could do today to contribute to climate solutions, what would you recommend?
I think, especially given everything that's going on in the world, and here, you know, politically with the Supreme Court, everything else. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things that I think about a lot is that climate doesn't just mean reducing greenhouse gas emissions and creating green space. Both of those things are really important, but if folks don't have a safe and healthy environment to live, work, play, and pray, then, you know, we're done. So I guess one thing is just encouraging people to think about environment from a sort of a more broad perspective, and the way that the EJ movement thinks about it. And I can't recommend enough just looking for organizations that are doing the work locally, like ACE, like Green Roots, who we work closely with, or other if there isn't a climate related organization, another organization that is Black, Brown, or Indigenous led, that is doing grassroots work and reaching out and saying, what do you need? Because I would venture to guess that there are people all over who are doing that work and who would welcome allies into the space.
Yeah, always that start from that. And I think you can learn so much by shadowing and lending a hand, and absolutely the climate movement needs more and more helpers, and yes, and that's a good recommendation. Well, thank you so much, Sofia, for being with us today to share more about your background and update us on ACE's work. We are so grateful to your contributions for making our world a better place, not only what your organization is doing, but what you're doing beyond your day-to-day jobs. So it's people like you that are improving things, and we thank you. And to everyone on the line, thank you for tuning in. Please join us next month for a second part in this series, where we will talk with Roseanne Bongiovanni, who is from Green Roots. And remember to engage with us online with the hashtag Let's Talk Climate. And you can follow us on our social channels for the latest thought leadership, resources, and episodes on climate action advocacy. So bye for now, and see you soon for the next Let's Talk Climate episode. Bye-bye.
Thanks, y'all.